Hi class, welcome back. This is our chapter 19 of the American Yawp. This one's titled The American Empire, and it deals with the expansion of American influence around the world post-Civil War, and largely as a result of the American industrialization that we spoke about in the last chapter. This chapter covers the critical period of U.S. history from the nation expanding beyond its own borders influentially and stepping into the world stage as an imperial power. Now we'll explore America's overseas expansion. The Spanish-American War will be front and center in this, and the debate over imperialism is going to grip the nation as well. So let's jump in to our conversation, and we'll learn about some very colorful figures such as Theodore Roosevelt. Now, by the late 19th century, the United States had fully settled its continental frontier. There's no frontier left. We've settled all the way from New York to California. But the desire for economic growth and increased global power is going to push the nation to start looking overseas. American business leaders, politicians, military strategists are all going to argue that expanding beyond America's borders, this is essential for securing new markets. Also, naval bases to protect those markets and shipping lanes and resources in general. Now, one of the key drivers of this expansion was a historian, a former naval sea captain by the name of Alfred Thayer Mahan. Maybe it's Mahan, don't know how he pronounced it. But Captain Mahan is a naval strategist, and he argued in his influential book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, that nations with powerful navies were able to dominate global trade, and that all the way since 1776, every powerful nation had a powerful navy. And this idea resonated with leaders like Theodore Roosevelt, who at the beginning of this story is, I think, Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He saw a strong navy as a key to projecting American power around the world. Now, the most significant turning point in America's push for empire, this is going to be the Spanish-American War, and it takes place exclusively in 1898. The conflict begins as a struggle between Cuban revolutionaries in Spain. The Cubans want their independence, and the United States is stepping in not only to sort of assist the Cubans socially, supplies and all that as the war breaks out, but also to protect American interest. Sugar plantations, cocoa facilities. Milton Hershey, for example, had sugar. That was his source of sugar. We had built railroads down there. But an explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor early that spring and sensationalist newspaper reporting, often called yellow journalism, is going to whip up public support for war in the United States. In other words, they start talking about the war, and people start saying we need to help them. This is not good. And so people start calling for U.S. intervention. Now, after a swift and decisive military campaign, the United States defeats Spain and emerges as a new global power. The Treaty of Paris, that'll end this war, will grant the U.S. control over a number of former Spanish territories. We gain Guam, we gain Puerto Rico as well, and we gain the Philippines. I think we pay about $15 million for the Philippines, but these all now are under American control. Again, as we've said in earlier chapters, maybe in 1301, Spain is on the decline, and it's been on the decline for a long, long time. And Puerto Rico and Cuba and places like this were some of the last real overseas empires, imperial holdings that Spain really had. Now, this is going to mark the United States transition from continental power to a global power. And one thing I do need to mention is while Cuba is freed, and we do have some intervention in Cuba with the Teller Amendment, we don't own Cuba. This is not like we do the Philippines and Guam and Puerto Rico. Cuba remains independent because some of the anti-imperialists had their way in these discussions. Now, while Americans celebrated the country's newfound status as a world power, not everyone supported imperialism. There was a heated debate that broke out between those who saw imperialism as a moral duty and a path to national greatness, and those who believed that it contradicted the nation's founding principles of liberty and self-determination. We were a colony once. We didn't care for it much, but now we're asking other people to sort of be under us in the same way that we were under the British. And so it's a good argument. It's a strong argument. Now, prominent figures like Mark Twain and Andrew Carnegie, they're going to join this anti-imperialist movement. or actually they joined a group called the American Anti-Imperialist League, arguing that it's hypocritical for the United States to subjugate other nations, especially when it fought for its own independence less than a century before. And despite this opposition, the imperialists will prevail. So while we have anti-imperialists, they are not going to win the argument, and the United States will continue to expand and continue to control other territories, at least for a while. Now, the Philippines in particular are going to be problematic, and it becomes a symbol of America's imperial reach and the contradictions that this whole era provides. After the Spanish-American War, the U.S. is going to face fierce resistance from Filipino nationalists, led by a man named Emilio Aguinaldo, who had hoped for independence. When the United States showed up and he's fighting against the Spanish, they said, "We'll help you." He said, "That's fine, but we want independence when it's over." That's not the way it works out. At the end of the day, the Filipinos find themselves in a brutal conflict with American forces in what is sometimes called the Philippine-American War, or the Filipino insurrection. Now, while the United States eventually established control over the Philippines, and this is going to happen through American sort of infrastructure building of hospitals and schools, and just in general helping the economy of the Philippines, this war is going to highlight the complexities and moral dilemmas of imperialism. Now, the debate over how to govern these new territories, the treatment of its people, continues to divide Americans. And meanwhile, U.S. expansion continues in the Pacific with the annexation of Hawaii. It's a stopover on the way to trade markets in Asia, and also the establishment of bases in Pearl Harbor, further solidifying American presence in the region. Now, as President Theodore Roosevelt sought to expand America's influence even farther, he's elected in, he becomes vice president under William McKinley in 1900. President McKinley is assassinated in 1901, making Vice President Theodore Roosevelt president now. And in 1904, he wins the presidency by his own right, so he'll serve another 4 years. Now, in 1904, Roosevelt is going to introduce what's called the Roosevelt Corollary. And if you'll remember back, maybe to some of our earlier conversations in 1301, think back to the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine says that we are going to sort of be we're not going to allow European countries to sort of come in and take over or influence sovereign nations within the Western Hemisphere. Well, the Roosevelt Corollary declares that the U.S. had the right to intervene in Latin American nations to preserve order and stability. And this policy is going to lay the groundwork for American involvement in Latin American affairs for decades to come. Now, Roosevelt, and Theodore Roosevelt, his most ambitious project is going to be the Panama Canal. By facilitating the construction of this canal, which shortens the distance from the Atlantic to the Pacific and vice versa. You don't have to go around South America anymore. The U.S. is going to gain control of crucial shipping routes that connected the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. Now, not only did this boost American trade, but it also demonstrates the global reach of United States power. So in summary, Chapter 19 covers a period when the United States emerged as a global imperial powerhouse. From the Spanish-American War to the annexation of territories like Hawaii and the Philippines, this chapter highlights America's growing ambition on the world and the debates over the costs and ethics of that empire that follow. So thanks for joining me on this little story about American imperialism. And if it helps, then let me know about it. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.